if someone comes to me and is like, I find a lot of value in traditional burial and embalming, I'm like, great, good. It should be accessible to you. Good.
Right.
You know, like it is about meeting the needs of the person and the family. It is not about the opinion of the funeral professional ever.
100%.
And that's what I think people that are getting offended in the profession aren't really hearing as much, right? Like I said, parting stone isn't for everyone. And I get that. It shouldn't be for everyone because no one is the same. There's no one answer or one size fits all in anything, especially in death care.
Welcome to the Direct Cremation Podcast with your hosts, Tyler Yamasaki and Will DeMichaelis. Hi, thank you for joining us on the Direct Cremation Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Yamasaki, CEO of Parting Pro. And as always, I'm here with my co-host, Will DeMichaelis, funeral home consultant and former manager of the Omega Society, a cremation brand that serves over 4,500 families per year. And as always, you can find links to both of our products and services below. So today's guest is the host of the Death Positive podcast, Death Curious, a platform for death exploration and a community of like-minded death positive people. They are also the director of outreach and education of Parting Stone, the company responsible for creating solidified cremated remains and most famously known for their Shark Tank fame. We're happy to discuss life, death, and alternative memorial options on today's episode with Alexandra Jo.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, welcome, Alexandra.
Thanks.
Great to have you. It's great to have someone on nearer our time zone on here for a change too.
Yeah, y'all are
makes scheduling a little bit easier.
Totally.
It's great to have you. And for those in the audience who don't know, could you kind of give us the story of Parting Stone and what you guys do and what you offer for families?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is we offer a complete alternative form of human remains to ashes after cremation called solidified remains. So instead of getting back a bag of ashes that's zip tied and in like a non-recyclable black plastic urn, you get a collection of beautiful stones that are safe to hold and touch. They don't break down if you leave them outside, and you can continue having a relationship with your loved one after cremation, which is really cool. And the story of how we got started is really just through personal experience. So our CEO, Justin Crow, lost his granddad a few years ago before the pandemic. And as he was relating to other people who were going through loss and the experience of planning a funeral, he ran into all of these people who were like, oh yeah, we had my grandmother cremated. I don't know where the cremains ended up, or yeah, I'm really ashamed to say, but my granddad is like in a box under my bed and it makes me really uncomfortable. Or like, you know, there's this weird urn on our mantle that's really stately and I don't feel connected to it at all, but my mom is in there. You know, it's like story after story after story. And so Justin, having a ceramics background and being an entrepreneur and being very business minded, was like, there has to be a better way to receive cremated remains than just a plastic bag of ashes. And so he got a grant to work with Los Alamos National Labs here in New Mexico, which everyone probably knows about now because of the movie Oppenheimer. But that is where the actual process for solidified remains happened as well. With that grant, we worked with some really cool scientists they do like ceramic science for the outside of spaceships, which is really cool. But they helped us figure out how to turn like cremated remains, which are mostly, you know, bones and different kinds of calcium and stuff like that, and make the chemical change to solidified remains so that we wouldn't have to add huge amounts of binders or additives or like suspend the remains in something else. So the solidified remains are actually your person's remains made solid. And it's been such a cool journey. I've been with the company since 2019. I started out as a tech in our lab working directly with the cremated remains because I actually have a visual art background specializing in sculpture. So I was doing like mold making experiments and working directly, like hand forming the stones, like with the cremated remains. I also have a creative writing minor degree and am extremely death curious. And so I started writing for different publications as I continued to, you know, build my career in this profession. And here we are 4 years later, almost 5 years later, and I'm the director of outreach and education, and I have this other brand for us, and it's just been such a cool journey to see us be on Shark Tank this year and really be helping people have better relationships with cremation and cremated remains.
Yeah, I think the synergy between what you're doing with solidified remains and your podcast has a lot of overlap, which is really nice. So, with what you described as an alternative to normal ashes, I know this is a bit of a change for most people to comprehend. So, how do you all think about your customers' journey through this process to provide support over this kind of new, with this new product offering? How do you think about that as a company?
Yeah, it's something we've been really aware of since the beginning because we are a B2B business model. So we work directly with funeral homes. We partner with them. We offer the service at wholesale and then they go present it to families. And one thing we noticed immediately right off the bat is that the people at Parting Stone doing the job every day were having this very close, intimate experience with the cremated remains, understanding that this is a person we're working with.
Mm.
And we know nothing about their loved ones. We know nothing about the family they leave behind or why they chose this. And so very early on in like 2019, we started sending blank note cards home with the orders. We are very, very focused on a high touch, very intuitive, experience for people. So we have really considered packaging and boxes and bags and stuff that we send stuff home with. And we started putting these really nicely designed blank note cards with just a little invitation of like, if you'd like to write us back and let us know who your person was or why you chose Parting Stone or what your experience with the stones is, we would love to hear from you. No pressure, but we'd love to hear from you. And tons of people started writing us back. Like immediately, like 30% of people who worked with us wrote us very long, very heartfelt responses to that invitation.
Nice.
And we have this huge collection of notes from families now that I actually use when I give presentations on Parting Stone because
Very cool.
we hear so much like, I'm so relieved that this is an option. I love being able to carry my person with me. I can still travel with my spouse. I can still like show my dad all the places that he never got to go, or we can have the memorial that we actually want. We can have a place to go visit if we leave stones at a specific tree or scatter them in a lake or, it's something that feels a little bit more tangible and permanent than cremated remains in ash form. And we hear that from families over and over and over again. And so we know that what we're doing is truly helping people have a better experience. And that is really important to us. And we listen to families' feedback on wanting, solidified remains specific containers. And now we have a solidified remain container with aerial urns. And so it's really their feedback and that communication has informed us every step of the way.
Yeah, I've found that with you guys and I guess Eterniva too, which I saw at first, they're offering merchandise. And then that's what I thought. And likewise with you. But what I realized is that the journey that you're offering is not just selling merchandise. It's the experience that you're giving is almost grief support in a way with your high touch cadence and communications with family in this transformative process. You're bringing them into this transformation, making it part of their experience so that they can be involved with that closure for their loved one and be with you on the entire step of the process. And it finally comes back to them in the form of solidified remains as the kind of the capstone to the entire process. And I know that Eterniva customers just are over the moon about that process and talk about how emotional receiving those diamonds are. And I'm sure it's the same for Parting Stone. Yes. And I've, released tons of cremated remains in beautiful urns, and it's not the same. It's not.
Two things there. We want to be really, really specific and communicate that we are not a product. We are not merchandise. We are a form of remains, right? We do the whole amount of remains. We're not taking a teaspoon of your loved one's ashes and making one stone. We're taking the whole amount of cremated remains, putting it through a continuation of that process. And the final form is a new form of human remains completely. And so that's been a challenge getting people, especially funeral home partners, to understand that we belong in the arrangement room, not in the selection room. So we're not with urns. We are, when a family sits down to make arrangements, you ask them okay, you've chosen cremation. Great. The next question is, what kind of remains do you want? Do you want to receive ashes or do you want to receive stones? And that really, especially in families who've never heard of us before and are in that grief state making decisions, that distinction helps them understand what they will be receiving. And you're
Right.
exactly right. It is a
Right.
whole service. And at every point in our lab, we have this proprietary chain of custody that's all barcodes and order numbers that's done digitally. And we scan each order in and out of stations immediately when they move. And when we do that, the family gets an email that says your person has moved from refinement to stone forming and from stone forming to solidification.
Right.
And so families are part of the journey, even while they're separated from the cremated remains while they're in our care.
Mhm.
And I think that does really set it apart from like, oh, you want to buy a piece of jewelry that you put a little bit of ash in
Right.
and wear around your neck, or, you know, you want to suspend some of the cremains in glass for a sculpture, right? Like it's really different because we are offering them an entire experience. And at the end, they get a new innovative form of remains that will last forever. So.
And on that note, with the jewelry and small keepsakes, mainly the jewelry. I mean, most of and apologies to anyone in the audience that loves cremation jewelry.
It's great, and it serves a need. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah,
it is. Some of it is beautiful, but not much of it is high quality. Alexandra, is what I'll say. Most of it is inexpensive stainless steel stuff that some of the threading will come apart, and you know you'll lose it swimming, or it'll rust, or you have to glue it shut, and then you can never open it. I mean, it's just it's not my favorite solution, and it's not, in my opinion, that valuable. Some pieces are wonderful, but not many to me.
Sure.
Something
And you've mentioned
like
Eternova, which is know excellent.
Yeah.
But that makes sense. Yeah, and so that is really what Justin and then the rest of us at the company set out to do, is like look at the solutions that we have right now and say, how can we do this better? And that truly is innovation. That is driving the space forward, right? Like how can we, with our ideas and the services that we offer, help move death care forward and serve more people better? And that's what we're doing. So,
All right. So what are some of the critiques that you've heard about parting stones?
Oh, Lord. I mean, I love this profession, and I get so frustrated with this profession because the second I start saying things like innovation and moving forward and serving more people and serving younger people, there is a large group of people who've been in the profession for multi-generations that are like, that's undignified, or, oh, I think this is gross, or why would you want to touch the cremains of your loved one? You know, and like, that's fine. I understand that not every service is for every person. We have the written verbal proof that we are for some people. And yeah, that's why I get so confused by that criticism, because even if this isn't good for you as an individual, if you're a funeral director or a funeral home owner, we could be good for someone who you serve.
Yeah.
In fact, chances are that we probably are good for someone that you serve. So even if it's not your favorite, I don't get it. So
we deal with similar pushback in different avenues, but similar mindset. So I feel for you, and I hope you feel for us too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Anyone who's like really trying to, like I said, move death care forward, I'm your cheerleader, because I feel like our profession was pretty stagnant for a while. And you know, that's what I do at Death Curious, is I'm trying to help people have a better, healthier, more honest relationship with the fact of our human mortality. And when there are only old, outdated, stale options, people aren't going to be really motivated to have those conversations. So we got to help people find meaning. And that means meeting them where they are, not just doing something because it's traditional.
Right.
I really want to talk to you about Death Curious, just as the brand is the movement. But with the stones, like, what have you found to be some of the more interesting things that people have done with them? Besides, like, just keep them or display them. Like, I'm sure in that form, there can be a lot more creative things that people have done other than just, like, spread them, like, you know, cremated remains or...
Yeah, totally. I mean, we see a lot of people do some, like, pretty intense travel with them, like, really intentional, like, my dad climbed this mountain in the Alps when he was 17. And so I'm going to take a stone and leave it in the same place. Or, we've seen people do like have their children like paint the stones in order to like try and understand and deal with the loss of like a grandparent or a parent better, which is really, really cool. We've actually had a lot of requests for us to change the shape of them so that they can skip easier, because it's like really important for people to be able to skip the stones, because that was something they did with the person who died.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many cool things. People also, this is something we love to hear. People also will have like box opening parties when they get the solidified remains back, because there's no guarantee what color each order is going to turn. Most of the stones are either white, light blue, or light green, but some orders, like 5% of orders, turn radical bright colors, and we have no idea why. We have an R&D, a research and development person, who is trying to experiment and figure out why that happens, but as of now, we don't know, and there's no way to predict it. So customers really love that. And we see them like gathering friends and family around almost for like a second memorial for when the stones arrive, and opening the box together. And then everybody picks their favorite and they all get to take them home and have them. Yeah. Tons of stories of people just keeping them in their pocket like worried stones. I mean, my cat is right here, who died a few years ago. This is Grandma Alice, my cat. And, so I keep her on my desk and pick her up and hold her every day, which is just, just like I do my other cats who are still alive and sit in my lap. So like just a whole range of really cool things that people do. I mean, and being able to leave them outside and they don't dissolve or break down, it's almost like you get the best of both worlds, scattering and permanent placement,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's actually a really nuanced point. You kind of don't have to decide necessarily. Gives you a lot more flexibility.
Mm-hmm. And you can do multiple things. Like you can keep some, you can scatter some, you can keep some in a vase and one in your pocket. Each member of the family can take a few, because each order makes between 40 and 60 stones, sometimes a little more. So very shareable. And that's something that we also see people really wanting to have an experience with, is like shared communal grieving these days. So
it's interesting that you created the service and the natural outcome was gathering and connection as part of it in the end. That is a really nice natural outcome from what you've built as a service. It's really beautiful. Really is.
Yeah, thanks.
It's kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing to see that how what you've created just manifests itself in really beautiful ways once they go home,
and it's been really wonderful for us to see too. And again, we're so thankful that people are willing to write us back or call us and let us know what they're doing and what it means to them. It's really fulfilling for sure.
Nice. What's up next for Parting Stone?
Oh, I mean, we have so much on the horizon. I mean, Shark Tank was a really huge deal. We're trying to refine the process even more so that we can cut down on wait time. Our lead time usually sits at around 6 weeks. I haven't been a worker in the lab for a long time, so don't quote me in stone on these numbers, but typically it sits at around 6 weeks. And so we're always trying to make that shorter with new technologies and improving the process with the, machinery that we use in the lab. We are also in a partnership with InvoCare in Australia to try and open a parting stone in Australia, which will be, a really cool thing. We've got the staff that is hired to go launch that project. So that's really exciting because cremation is so popular in Australia, and we feel like there's just such a huge demographic of people that would really be served there. So we're excited to expand and just keep pushing forward.
Nice. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Cool. So you are a fellow podcaster as well in deathcare. I feel like we're a very small community. And you've created this Death Curious. What would you call Death Curious? Could you go more into what Death Curious is?
Yeah, sure. So Death Curious is, I want to call it like a death education platform. Like Justin, at Parting Stone, it's probably a little more comfortable calling it like a brand, a lifestyle brand, which it is. I also truly have seen that with the podcast and our social media accounts and the blog, it's become a platform for community and education around getting curious about death and dying. And it's a project that Parting Stone has started and I've taken over and I'm directing now, and that we're all really excited about because, yeah, we have also found that something a lot of our families at Parting Stone have said is like, you know, being able to have this relationship is something I didn't know that I needed, because nobody talks about grief and nobody talks about what it's like to experience losing someone. And something that Justin and I have both been thinking about for a long time is like how to reach beyond just funeral professionals with these ideas that we have and with this information that we have. And how do we build more community around people who are curious about learning more about death care in the profession, but also are craving and want a safe and healthy space in which to have real conversations about death in. And so that's what Death Curious is a platform for community and death care education.
It's much needed. Have you found a lot of success outside of the profession with
Yeah,
the community?
I actually have. It's pretty wild. I mean, we started Death Curious officially in December. I started really putting all of my effort into trying to grow and build the community around March. And we've got like a really solid 1,000 followers on Instagram. We've got 6,000 on TikTok. One of my videos got 500,000 views. Like, people are commenting, responding. They're downloading the like ebooks that I write. They're asking for things. The podcast consistently gets listens, and people reach out to me and respond and tell me what they're curious about or what they are confused about or what they want to know and what conversations they want to have. And so I think people really are desperate. And I think Caitlin Doty is a perfect example of how desperate people are for information and conversation around what goes on in the profession and just death in general. But I also know that she really alienated herself from the funeral profession. A lot of funeral directors really don't like Ask a Mortician. They really don't like the Caitlin Doty brands and books. And that's another thing that Justin and I were like, there's got to be a better way to do this, because people want the information, but we don't want to alienate the profession that works so hard to serve these people. So how do we deliver this information in a way that is accurate and accessible, but also honors the work that funeral professionals do? And so that's kind of where we stand on that.
That's good to acknowledge, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do when things are changing and you're just trying to educate people about those changes. And some people within the profession that's changing don't like the change that they're seeing. And it's very difficult to navigate. And that's something I think that we have in common with our podcast. You are more like consumer oriented and just death positive oriented in general. We are trying to help these business owners make these changes and really step into the 21st century and kind of show what the top of the mountain looks like for companies who've done it and why you should do it and how you can do it. And even with that, we get pushback, and even to the extent that some funeral directors really still think that cremation shouldn't be offered to families. They want everyone with a traditional funeral. And that's been a conversation that really should have stopped 15 years ago, maybe more.
It should never have even been a conversation, because the fact that the word should is in that sentence negates it from validity, in my opinion.
I agree with you.
Yeah, because, you know, and a lot of people perceive me as this like super eco-friendly, only green options person. And it's like, I champion green options because I care about the earth and the environment. And to be frank, I think that it's a really important conversation to have. But I will be the first one to tell you that if someone comes to me and is like, I find a lot of value in traditional burial and embalming, I'm like, great, good. It should be accessible to you. Good.
Right.
You know, like, it is about meeting the needs of the person and the family. It is not about the opinion of the funeral professional, ever.
100%. 100%.
And that's what I think people that are getting offended in the profession aren't really hearing as much, right? Like I said, Parting Stone isn't for everyone, and I get that. It shouldn't be for everyone, because no one is the same. There's no one answer or one size fits all in anything, especially in death care. I mean, hell, my gender is non-binary. I don't even think there's like a one size fits all for like personal identities. Why would death care be any different, right? Every single person is going to, you know, have different needs and different desires around what a memorial looks like or doesn't, what the disposition method is. And we got to meet those people where they're at, regardless of what we think.
Right. And even then, if you are a company that, may not serve everyone's needs, you don't have to poo-poo those who do.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a mutual professional collegial respect that I would kind of expect. But Tyler kindly takes care of all of the messaging for the Direct Cremation podcast, and some of the verbiage that we've gotten as responses is, leaves something to be desired on the side of compassion and general professionalism. But and that comes with putting yourself out there and talking about things that not everybody wants to hear, and you do that in your own way, and we're doing that in our own way. And I think the commentary manifests itself differently, but still
yeah, absolutely,
we get the hate. We have the haters, as they say.
I mean, if again, we can't be for everybody, there's no way that you're going to please everybody.
No, you're not. And I understand that the thing about social is that there's no incentive structure to have a calm, cool conversation on social. The incentive on social is to galvanize for attention, which means generally the most sensationalist comment or interaction wins the day, rather than actually trying to have an honest discussion about really important topics like death and what you want for the end of your life, and how you want your body taken care of after you die. These are
totally
important questions, and I think any type of judgment or naysaying or critique is just a bit silly. It's a bit silly.
I agree, because it's operating from a scarcity mentality. It's operating from a competition where, like, I feel like community would be a lot more productive for all of us. And this is something I was actually just talking to Brian from the Undertaking the podcast about.
I listened to your episode with him. It was great.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And, we were talking about how he's very open to, like, if my funeral home is booked or busy, I will recommend the guy down the street. Or if I know that they do like printed programs better than I do, I'll send the family there. And because there's no need to have this sense of competition if we're all supporting each other and if we all have each other's backs. And so, if you, for your funeral home, don't want to invest in alkaline hydrolysis, equipment, great, don't do it. But if someone comes to you and asks for alkaline hydrolysis, don't tell them no. Tell them, we don't do that, but our buds down the street do. And that we're building that community for our profession. And we're also showing families that we have their best as our intentions. And so, that's a really, I don't know, it's a conversation I get really passionate about.
Same.
So,
It's nice to have a kindred spirit.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
So as you've dabbled in the consumer side a bit, or the non-death care side, do you feel like death can become something that is more widely accepted, more widely talked about, not as taboo? Do you actually feel that happening anytime soon?
I'm hopeful about it. And the fact that in less than a year, I've got an audience of 6,000 people who watch and comment the social media posts I make about this, I think is probably a good sign. So, it's not a crazy high amount as far as social media and TikTok goes, but it's like 6 months. There's clearly an audience for this, right?
And our niche is small, so I wouldn't expect hundreds of millions of people either. So,
but I also don't think that it's actually that small, because also I'm obsessed with talking about this and thinking about this, like, as someone who has experienced personal loss and then has come into this profession kind of by way of creativity and my art background, and then has gotten just more and more and more involved and has gone through celebrant training and, has really made this my full career and, committed to it. I talk to my friends about this. I talk to my partners about this, and everyone has a unique experience. Everyone has something to say. I have not yet run into someone in person or online that's like, this is gross, I don't want to talk about it. Right. It's like, oh man, I never thought about it before, but you're right. We don't talk about this enough, right? Being in the queer community and talking to fellow trans folks about how to protect your identity by making a last will and testament and an advance directive. People are like, I don't know that I need to do that, but I really want to learn how. Like, people are receptive to this stuff, right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I am hopeful. And I think that we will be more successful the more support that we have from the profession and how receptive they are to listening to what people who are going to be their customers and the people they serve, like how much they're actually willing to listen to them. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think our role in that is to have conversations
absolutely.
to listen to.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we'll keep pumping out the conversations, and
Yeah.
eventually they'll have to listen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are so many ways to go about it too. I mean, like on the Death Curious blog, we've got articles ranging from when is the right time to plan my funeral and will cremation kill our zombie fantasies, right? Like, will we stop having zombie movies when cremation becomes too popular to a certain I mean, clearly the answer is no, but there's so many different ways to approach the subject of death, right? Like I'm working on an article of like 4 death positive pop culture moments that you may not realize. And then I'm also working on
Cool.
like why, we should be supportive if death care workers want to partake in recreational marijuana where it's legal. Like there are so
Mhm.
many different angles to approach the conversation. There's something for everyone, right? Like
Yeah.
how will AI impact the future of death care specifically? And yeah, like what are the real environmental impacts of each disposition method and how can we research that? Like
Mhm.
there's something for everyone around this
Yeah.
topic because death happens to everyone and
Right,
everyone that
right.
you know and every pet that you have and every plant that is on planet Earth, right? Like it's just
Everything in the universe, as far as I know.
yeah. And so it is truly the only fact that's guaranteed to happen to
Yeah.
all of us. So there's got to be something for each of us in this conversation. And that makes
Yeah.
me really hopeful. It's just, about having the platform to reach people and having the support of people who are in this profession.
Yeah. And I think you do a good job of producing stuff in a digestible way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys too, for sure.
Which brings people in, and that's all you want. You just want to bring
Mhm.
more people to the table, and just keep
Yeah.
chatting and keep those conversations going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely.
Cool.
We wanted to jump into maybe just your thoughts on alternative memorials versus other like options, like dispositions. I know you touched on it, and I know you touched on your like inclination for green dispositions. So you want to discuss kind of your feelings on alkaline hydrolysis and NOR?
Oh, yeah, sure. I love both of those options a lot. I'm a big fan of green burial. I'm also a big fan, like I said, of the more traditional cremation and traditional burial. If that's what people want, I'm not naysaying any of them. But if we are looking at this truly and exclusively through an ecological impact lens, natural organic reduction, green burial, and alkaline hydrolysis are so cool because alkaline hydrolysis and natural organic reduction both allow metals to be recycled from the body, which really offset a lot of the energy that's put into actually doing the disposition method. And so they become nearly carbon neutral. And there's this really cool study from the Netherlands that happened like 10 years ago that breaks down. They don't do natural organic reduction. I don't think it was popular enough when the study was going, but Katrina Spade and the folks at Return Home are really great about gathering data. And so they were able to get me the numbers that I needed to compare it with this study. But yeah, those options become nearly carbon neutral because of that recycling process. And because especially with NOR, you're putting good, rich fertilization back out into the land. And so there's a lot of offset that happens there as well. And when we really break down how impactful everything we do is, it becomes quite staggering. If you think about every material that goes into just the creation of a casket, right? There's fabric, there's foam, there's chemicals, there's glue, there's metal, there's screws and nails, lacquers, finishes, wood, right? So we're already talking mining, deforestation, manufacturing facilities, shipping for all of those things, and then shipping for the casket itself, which takes a ton of fossil fuels. And wow, like, so just a casket in and of itself has an incredibly high impact. And then when you also go into thinking about, the embalming, chemical manufacturing, when you go into all of the different things that go into cemetery maintenance and upkeep, gas for the lawnmowers, right? mining
Everything and all that goes into the ground.
It just goes into the ground and then it sits there, right? And the concrete that goes into the vaults has to be mined and manufactured. The stone for the headstone, the metal that goes on the headstone has to be mined and manufactured. And it's pretty staggering how impactful each individual traditional burial is when you compare it to something that becomes carbon nearly net neutral, like alkaline hydrolysis or natural organic reduction. And, again, there's a lot of pushback of like, oh, you're just going to flush grandma down the drain, which is kind of bonkers to me because A, that's not what's happening. And B, what do you think happens to the stuff when you embalm someone?
Yeah.
The body parts, right? Like, what's the difference? And so I see those criticisms and I just kind of scratch my head.
Yeah, you've never been in a prep room.
Yeah. Like, what are you talking? And these are people that clearly have. They're just really stuck on tradition and are frightened that their business is going to go under because people are going to see these new options. And instead of saying, "How can I work with this? How can we partner? How can we collaborate?" Right? They just get scared, and that's a natural response. But the more actual information we get out about this stuff, I think the better it will be because I have a lot of data to back up the fact that the more the millennial and Gen Z generations are going to age into death planning as we have grandparents and parents who die, the more eco-friendly options are going to be requested or needed in order for those people to feel like the funeral options they choose have meaning and value.
Yeah.
I can see that. I'm not saying
that's
that
not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. No, it's not.
But I do understand. I understand exactly what you mean. I can't imagine someone who's 25 planning for their parents' funeral in 25 years, like purchasing a casket. I kind of don't see that. But I mean, I don't know. We don't know.
And again,
we don't know what we don't know.
No population is a monolith. I'm not going to paint with a broad brush, right?
Yeah,
but I'm saying that there is going to be a paradigm shift in terms of majority. And something that I see often that I will speak to on the green stuff is like I hear funeral directors at conferences constantly saying, well, we don't offer green burial because no one's ever asked for it. And this is where I see this really huge cognitive dissonance or information gap between what people know they can ask for and what funeral professionals are telling people is available, right? So someone saying
1,000%.
Yeah. Like if someone does not know that green burial is an option, how are they supposed to ask for it?
And if you don't offer it, you're not going to tell them it's an option.
100. Yeah, that's it. And so that's what I'm trying to do with Death Curious is like empower people with their own education so that they can come into funeral homes confident about what they want, what's going to meet their needs, and allow funeral directors to meet those needs in better ways.
100%.
Because it's also impossible for a single funeral director to go over every single option that's available. It's just, it would be impossible to sit there and go through all the traditional burial, all the cremation, all the solidified remains, all the alkaline hydrolysis, all the things you can do with cremated remains, records, shotgun shells, so on and so right. There's no way that you can get educated on every option in the hour that you have in the arrangement room. It's just not possible for funeral directors to do. I don't think that that's fair to put that burden on them, right? No, I want to empower families with knowledge ahead of time so that they know what to ask for and so that funeral professionals can serve them. And so that's what I'll say about green options is like the more we get the word out there, the more people are going to relate to what has meaning for them and then feel comfortable asking for it. And one thing I found, especially in the TikTok community, is that I get a lot of messages and comments and DMs about, well, this is really cool, but I'm going to be a tree because I want to do something that's eco-friendly. And oh boy, is it really not super easy or possible to quote unquote become a tree. If you want a green option, because that's just not how science or biology or ecology works. You can't just plant a tree on top of a green buried body and expect everything to go well, right? And so how do we let people know like what options are? Natural organic reduction, excellent option if you want to be a tree. Just become fertilizer and then fertilize trees, right? We can do a green burial and plant a non-invasive tree species nearby, but that's far enough away so that when that new tree needs to be watered with tons and tons of gallons of water every day, it doesn't waterlog and submerge or, make the body float to the top of the soil, right? So there are ways to do this, but you need to know how, because you walk into a funeral home and tell any funeral director in the country, I'm going to be a tree, they're not going to know what to do for you, right? They're not going to just be able to do that because it's not a thing. And so it's like those kinds of eco-friendly death option myths that I would love to dispel, empower people on what is real and what they actually can ask for, things like that.
Yeah, there are a few options where you can take ashes and put it in like what's called like a bios urn, which is like
I talk about bios urns a lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like those.
Yeah,
that's
great.
kind of like the closest thing to.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's still, you're not nourishing that tree, right? Like you have to put a lot of soil stabilizers and pH balancers and stuff in there to actually allow the tree to survive, but you can be in there with it, and I talk about that a lot. There's an article on the Death Curious blog that goes through all of these options. And
cool. I didn't see that. I'll look for that.
Yeah, it's kind of far back now. I think I published it in April, but
okay.
But yeah, it's called "Can I Really Be a Tree When I Died?" So, and it goes through all these things, and I've got some really cool info from Mel Bennett of Life Forest, who's a dear friend and does some really great cremation burial with trees as a marker, and is very clear in the language that your cremains will be separate from the tree, but the tree will be your marker, and it's going to be great. We have this national preserve forest land. It's really, it's a cool organization, and she really helps dispel some of that information about how, like, we're not going to be, feeding the tree with your cremains.
Just being transparent about what's actually happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, I hear a lot about the mushroom suit that isn't even being manufactured anymore because it didn't really work. And
it was that TED Talk, right?
Yeah, it was the TED Talk. Everyone wants to, the Capsula Mundi pod, that's not a real thing. It's also an art project. Like, they have urns, but that's like the tree tear-shaped pod. Everybody's like, I'm just going to put my grandma in the pod. And then I hear embalmers be like, you are mistaken if you think I'm going to put your grandmother into a tree pod. That isn't even a real thing, right? Like, it's not a real option. And so, like, the more we can tell people what real options actually are, the more they will be empowered to actually ask for them. So
I totally agree. And the only other thing I'll add, which is my favorite, is memorial reefs.
Yes.
I really like the idea of, like, being fish food and fish swimming around me for eternity. I really do. I love the water. I was like, this speaks to me. Like, you're speaking my language. I'll do this.
That's so cool. Yeah, I think that's a really great option too. I actually am doing a TikTok series right now on the Death Curious page. That's what funeral option would each sign of the zodiac pick. And just before I came on this podcast, I published the Cancer one. And spoiler alert, I feel like Cancers would love to be a coral reef, because they're a water sign and they're very nurturing. They love to, like, build community and, like, feed people and grow things. And so I think that's, like, a perfect Cancer vibe funeral option. So go check that out on my page if you're interested in astrology and death care.
I'm a Leo. What do you have for Leos?
Ooh, so Leo is a fire sign. So I definitely have. It's fireworks. Fireworks are a great option. Yeah, because so flame cremation and then putting the cremated remains in, like, a firework display, or, like, I'd actually had shooting into space as the Aquarius sign, but I'm spoiling the series. I don't want to give away too much because they're not done yet. So yeah,
we won't spoil that.
Cool.
As someone who's really connected to both the consumer side and the business side of death care, where do you feel like the biggest difference between expectations are between death care today and the consumers that are going to be experiencing death care probably for the first time?
Yeah, that's a good and interesting question, and one that I want to answer really thoughtfully, because, as you said, I feel like I really am straddling, like, having one foot in the profession and one foot in talking to people out in the world who are not in the profession. And I hear funeral professionals talk about how much they care about their jobs, how much they care about their families, and how hard the job is, right? How they're overworked, they are underpaid, but they do this out of a, love for the profession. And then I still hear so many people out in the world say, I was taken advantage of. They jacked up the prices. They didn't listen to me. I didn't get what I wanted. The service didn't mean anything to me. And I feel like there's just this huge, it's like a misfire of communication, right? Yeah. Because people today, at least, and I can't speak for past generations and how things have been done for most of the 20th century, but, like, I think people today are not looking for a business suit legal paperwork kind of interaction when they are planning a funeral. And that is what they are getting, because that is what we have set up in the last 100 years in America. And I think that a lot of funeral professionals who are, traditional, think that that's what people want. They think they have to be professional and formal in order for people to think that they're being taken seriously. But I think people are wanting to be met in a more personal way these days.
Yeah.
And I have a sneaking suspicion that that's where a lot of the miscommunication is that funeral directors are like, we got to be professional. We have to be business oriented. We have to be doing things this way for people to respect us. And then people are like, I want it to be okay if I break down and cry and not be made to feel uncomfortable because someone's looking at their watch, or I don't want to feel like I can't connect to them because they're hiding behind this very formal business suit. Right. And so I think that's huge.
Yeah. And I think that's changing, because I think a lot of the successful, like especially cremation service providers that really lean into like affordable cremation arrangements, but with high touch customer experiences, they understand that fully, because they'll show up to work in like a polo or even just a t-shirt, but when they get on the phone, you hear someone that sounds like they're in a tuxedo.
Right. Yes. Correct.
Right. And that's a huge difference. And that phone etiquette, that care, that compassion, and it doesn't matter what you're wearing when you're talking to somebody over the phone and doing a phone arrangements, and they just know, like, when they get off the phone, as long as that family feels that person was there for me, I felt they were clear. They didn't take advantage of me. They were authentic and sincere. I feel like mom is in good hands. Right.
Exactly. And on that note, when I found out, because again, I'm going to be the first to tell you, I am not a funeral director. I did not go to mortuary school, right? This is coming from my personal experiences, what I've seen of the profession being in the job that I have, right? At the startup and on the tech side of things, on the grief side of things. But when I found out that in mortuary school, you don't have to take grief support counseling classes or training. You don't have to take like interpersonal like skills classes. You are talking about like spreadsheets and book balancing and the art of embalming. And that's pretty much it. I was absolutely shocked. I was completely surprised. I assumed that funeral directors had to go through years of counseling support and training, because they are a first contact when someone has experienced trauma and is grieving. And so I think that that's all, but when people enter the profession and it's presented to them as, you need to have business acumen, right? Which is true. If you want to pay your employees, right? You want to put food on your table. That's true. But I think that, that gap in information is where a lot of consumers are surprised and disappointed. And so again, I'm not blaming the funeral professionals. I think that, the system itself could use an overhaul. Which is easier said than done. Again, this is not my job. And I will be the first one to say, like, I respect funeral directors and funeral home owners and the job that they do, like, so much. It is so hard, and I see how hard they work. But I want to, it's almost like I want to be the person that bridges that gap, having experience in both worlds, right? And like, how do we do this? How do we do this better moving forward with new generations of people? So,
and really understanding that, like, a lot of these people are good people, but
absolutely,
they're great people, but they need to accept that things are changing and be willing to make those changes, and getting on board with that. Really getting on board with understanding the changing landscape to save their business.
Yes.
And so that they can actually have a future, especially if they're not planning to retire in the next 3 to 5 years.
And with the understanding too that when someone like you or I says things are changing, this is what's going to happen, this is how we do things differently, we're not saying that you have been doing things wrong. Right? You've been doing things the way they've been done since the, capitalist funeral industry has been a thing for the last 100 years. But we are saying, like, there is a next step. Yeah, and we're not discrediting the work that you've done or the effort that you've put in. We're just saying this is what's next. It's a both and, not an either or.
Yeah.
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 I want to be really clear about that, because I think that too is some pushback that I see is like, well, these people are coming in here telling me I've been doing everything wrong. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. Right. I'm trying to say, like, you've come this far and here's what's next, you know, and there's a difference.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome, Alexandra.
We always ask this question, but what do you think death care looks like in 10 years?
In 10 years, I think we're going to continue to see alkaline hydrolysis grow despite all of the like pushback that we're getting. I think we're going to continue to see NOR grow and natural burial grow. But I also, again, I don't think that traditional burial is going to ever go away completely. I don't think that cremation is ever going to go away completely. I think that we are going to see a lot more out queer folks in the profession, because I know that we're here and a lot of us are just in the closet. I'm very lucky, again, that I don't have to do that where I work at Parting Stone. Real shout out to company culture there. But yeah, and I also think that, you know, the numbers we're seeing come out of mortuary school, we're going to see a lot more like trans and genderqueer people. We're going to see a lot more women, because that's who's going to mortuary school. I think that hopefully we will see a relax in the way that we have to present ourselves, the way that we have to interact and be limited in the work environment. And yeah, I think that we're going to continue to see new and innovative options, because this is clearly a space that is ripe for innovation. It is ripe for that very hackneyed word at this point, but disruption, right? Like that's how there was space for Parting Stone. That's how there was space for Return Home. That's how there was space for Eterniva, right? Is because like the need is there. And I think more and more people are going to start getting ideas about like how to fill that need for new and more diverse options. So that's what I see.
Cool. Thanks for the input. I tend to agree with you.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Alexandra, for talking with us today. Where can people find you?
Yeah, thank y'all so much for having me on. You can find me at deathcurious.com. And on the website, there's a bit about us as a platform, and there's the blog, there's the podcast. You can also find us on social media at Death Curious on TikTok and Instagram. And you can also listen to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcasts. And we are called Death Curious. I'm also, you feel free to reach out to Parting Stone. I'm on LinkedIn. So I'm out there, and I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Alexandra.
Right,
really nice having you on and talking with you.
Yeah, thank y'all so much.
So for the Direct Cremation podcast, I'm Tyler Yamasaki with my co-host Will DeMichaelis. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you ever want to know more, please find us at directcremation.com.